Oh, hey. I've been trying to solve this puzzle for decades now. Still have no clue what I'm doing. Reminds me of some games from my childhood. Games with puzzles that took me entirely too long to beat. Now, I like to think I'm pretty capable when it comes to puzzles. I've played my fair share of Tetris 99. I beat Ocarina of Time's Water Temple and Majora's Mask Stone Temple Tower on the first try, no issues. But there were some games that stumped me. Games that came to a screeching halt, all because my child brain couldn't solve some innocuous puzzle. So I would be forced to just start the entire game over, or run around in the limited area that I had access to. So I want to talk about my top 3 puzzles in video games. Why only 3? Well, because I already told you, I'm pretty capable when it comes to puzzles. Come on, don't you listen? In 1996, a new title exploded onto the video game scene. A game with a memorable and beloved mascot. This game strived to be something different from its predecessors, and is breaking all sorts of boundaries. That game was Bubsy 3D. Earlier that year though, we also got Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars, a game co-developed by Nintendo and pre-Enix Squaresoft. This was during the height of Square's dominance in the RPG market, and there was no better company for Nintendo to turn to than Squaresoft when it came to co-developing an RPG with everyone's favorite plumber. I first came across this game at a comic shop that started selling video games. Now, the first game I got from that comic shop was actually Balls 3D for the Sega Genesis. But I would go back a week later and saw that they had this mysterious Super Mario RPG sitting on the shelf. So somehow, I managed to convince them to trade me my copy of Balls 3D for Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars. That's right, I traded Balls 3D for Mario RPG. That's a win in my book. While Mario RPG wasn't my first foray into RPGs, that title goes to Dragon Warrior 2, or The Magic of Scheherazade. It was certainly one of the most memorable. I put countless hours into this game. Now, I did have my occasional hiccups when it came to progression, such as the NPCs that don't continue their dialogue unless you jump, but nothing compared to the sunken ship just past Seaside Town. About halfway through the ship, you come to a room with a locked door and 6 floating blocks. Each block has various letters on them, and when you jump, that letter shifts into place. The puzzle is to create the password that opens the door. The hint you're given is that it's something found in the bottom of the sea. Easy. Oyster. Moving on. Alright, well, there's more to this puzzle than meets the eye. There's a hallway just before this room that has multiple smaller rooms in it. Each one contains a puzzle, and when you solve these puzzles, you'll be given a hint as to what the overall answer is supposed to be. The problem being that I could only really solve one of these puzzles as a kid, which gave me the hint R before L. Oh, okay, perfect. That's the clue I needed. And the answer is oyster. Now, I'm not saying I was the brightest child, but I was absolutely determined that the answer had to be oyster. You see, the problem with this puzzle is that those smaller puzzles were hard. Most of them are doable nowadays, but one stands out above the rest, and that's the 3D maze. This thing was an absolute mess. You had to navigate Mario through a 3D maze that you couldn't rotate. You had no idea where he was in it, besides the occasional hole that you could jump and poke your head through. It's complete blind luck to get through this. I said the number 3 was the Pearls puzzle, but I'm lumping this in too because it's worth mentioning. So you're basically getting 2 puzzles for the price of 1 here. So how did I solve this puzzle and eventually move on with the rest of the game? Well, I can't exactly say that it was intelligence. No, it was really just blind luck. You see, one day I randomly decided to join my stepmom for a trip to Meijer. That's a local grocery store for those of you who aren't originally from Ohio. And lo and behold, I found the strategy guide for Super Mario RPG. I quickly paged through it and I found the answer. Pearls. But not confident enough in my own memory, I was able to convince my stepmom to buy that guide for me, thus allowing me to finally move on with the rest of the game. I've technically already talked about this in one of my previous videos covering the worst strategy guide for Sonic 3, so I won't harp on it for too long, but because of how long I did get stuck on this, it deserves to be on the list. Essentially, in Sonic 3 and the Carnival Night Zone Act 2, you'll eventually find yourself in a room with a door that locks behind you. There is no avoiding this, at least not as Sonic or Tails anyway. When you enter the room, there's a floating barrel, the same ones found throughout the stage. The trick here is that you're supposed to jump on this barrel to make it move down, then rhythmically press up and down on the D-pad to make it gain more and more height while also going lower and lower. Once it drops far enough down, you can jump off to the right and finish up the stage. The problem is, this isn't taught to the player anywhere in the game. At no point in time do you need to press up or down on the D-pad to progress. It was sheer blind luck that kids were able to figure it out. Now, I did later on find out, after I posted the video about my terrible strategy guide, that there was another strategy guide that actually helped with this. The official Game Pro Strategy Guide. So to all the kids that had the Game Pro Strategy Guide, f*** you. I mean, congrats on being able to beat Sonic 3 before me. So that brings us to... When I think about games that I got stuck on as a kid, there is one that reigns supreme. One that I was stuck in a single place for years. And that is The Legend of Zelda, Link's Awakening. Link's Awakening first came out on the Game Boy in June 1991. I played this game constantly. Hell, even my mom played it. It was because of her that I was able to solve some of the earlier puzzles in the game, such as sprinkling the powder on the raccoon to proceed through the mysterious woods. But not even she was able to help me when it came to the Bottle Grotto. The second dungeon in the game is located in the swamp north of the village. The moment you beat the first dungeon, you return to the village, and you're sent out to go rescue the kidnapped Bow Wow, who is necessary for entering Dungeon 2, the Bottle Grotto. It's honestly not that long of a dungeon, and the overall main gimmick comes from hitting these switches to raise or lower parts of the floor to move on. The issue I had, though, was getting the boss key. I knew what room the boss key was in. Hell, I even knew how to get it. It's the execution that I failed at. If you collect the stone tablet, or the beak in the later versions of the game, the hint that you're given is to defeat the imprisoned Pole's voice, Last Stalfos. Okay, well that's pretty simple. So I do just that. I went to the room, killed the Pole's voice, killed the Stalfos, and nothing. Cool. I do this over and over again, not realizing I was missing one key factor in this equation. So what did I do? Simple. I left the dungeon. I had the power bracelet now, so I just go exploring the rest of Koholint Island. The problem is, you can't continue if you have Bow Wow, so at some point the game will come to a stop. I fully explored every nook and cranny of the island that I was able to get to. I was fascinated by this world and I wanted to see more, but I also didn't know how to progress. So what was the problem? Well, the short answer is that I was dumb, but I do feel like there was more to it than that. To get past this puzzle, you're supposed to defeat the Pole's voice, then come over here to the bottom right hand corner, take out the keys, then lastly, the Stalfos. That's it. That's the whole puzzle. Now, I think part of the issue was that I was playing this on the original Game Boy. You know, the one with the dot matrix screen and the only colors being green and yellow. Yeah, that. There was something about those original Game Boys that I never noticed until I saw a friend with a Game Boy Pocket sometime later on, and that was how much blur there was in them. Combined with the fact that there was no screen light, you could only raise or lower the contrast. And lastly, something which I would not find out until much later on in my life, is that I'm red-green colorblind, so it's not all that shocking that I would miss a small detail like a keys being in the bottom right-hand corner of the room when everything is a shade of green. Sometime later, I got a Super Game Boy. This was the device that let you play your Game Boy games on the TV, in color. Or, well, kind of, because you had to assign the color palettes yourself, and there were limited options as to what you could do with it. It came with a booklet that had suggestions for the best way to play the games, which were pre-designed palettes for specific titles, one of them being Link's Awakening. Unfortunately, I don't have the book anymore, but I do remember it having a line in it saying, "Use this color to make the mystery of the Pole's voice easier." So I did. And it didn't. That's right, even with a Super Game Boy, I wasn't able to get past this puzzle. So how did I get past it eventually? Well, honestly, it was just dumb luck. I got to the point where I realized the keys was in the room, but I never put it into the equation. Most of the time, I just mindlessly killed it like I did with enemies in every other room of the game. At some point though, I just happened to kill it after I killed the Pole's voice and before the Stalfos, and bam. That's it? That's all I needed to do? I spent literal years on this puzzle. I spent so much time at the beginning of the game that once I finally moved past it, it felt like I was playing a brand new Zelda game. This is it. The world's my oyster. Nothing is gonna stop me. Oh, come on! Yeah, the whole throw a pot at the door to open it got me for a bit, but nowhere near as long as Bottle Grotto, so I thought it was an honorable mention. I'd say if I've learned anything from these puzzles, is that often the answer is right in front of my face. Now then, to solve this one.